Welcome to the Franchise Woman Podcast, where passion and purpose collide, profits are made, and relationships forged. I'm Rebecca Monet, CEO and Chief Scientist at Zoracle Profiles. I'm here with my co-host, community advocate, speaker, author, and entrepreneur, Tracy Kawa. Our guest today is Matt Middendorp, an entrepreneur and real estate investor. Beyond his own businesses, Matt has helped hundreds of business owners use employee stock ownership plans, ESOPs, as a powerful alternative to traditional succession strategies. He's passionate about preserving company culture, rewarding employees, and guiding business owners towards smart, sustainable exits. We're so excited to have you and have this conversation, Matt. So welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you very much for having me. Just based on the pre-recording conversation, it sounds like this is something your audience really will be excited to hear, and I'm glad to share it.
For sure, no doubt.
Very cool. So, Matt, I'd like to kick this off by asking you a question pertaining to the fact that you were an entrepreneur for like 10 years, I believe. You were in the banking industry. You worked with franchisees, so you understand that space. Like,
Yeah.
where did all of this expertise begin? And what are you insanely passionate about that maybe ties all of these different areas together?
Yeah. So, it's interesting, right? When you reflect, and it's funny because I was actually just having this conversation the other day on how do you get to where you are? I just turned 50, right?
Nice.
And the gray in the beard hopefully doesn't give it away too much. But when you look back and reflect on the path that leads you somewhere, it's funny because I actually look at um, being in college, right? I went back to school when I was 25. I'd worked in retail before that, gained a ton of leadership experience. But I went to school all day and I worked all night, putting myself through school. And the company that I worked for was employee owned. It was an ESOP, employee stock ownership plans. For those of you that don't know what an ESOP is, it is and we'll talk about what it is in a minute. But so I worked for an ESOP and I just felt a different culture than I had had working corporate retail. You come in and people care about
Yeah.
what they're doing. They care about the company. They know how they impact the bottom line in a way that I didn't understand until I started working for an employee-owned business. And I'm a punk kid who's 25 years old and just goes, wait a minute, this is not normal. This is extraordinary. And I worked there all through college. Um, Left college, somehow ended up in banking after I graduated. And I'll make a very long story short there. In my commercial portfolio, as we discussed, I worked with franchise companies quite a bit. I worked with ESOP companies a lot too. Again, the ESOP, this idea of employee ownership kept popping up. I had businesses that sold to an employee ownership trust while they were, I'm sorry, an ESOP trust while they were in my portfolio. I had businesses that were there, and I got to see the actual truth behind the numbers for these people. And it was really exciting to see, well, man, I experienced it as an employee, but to see the financial gains for the company as a banker when they went to an ESOP, it was pretty astounding. So fast forward then, I left banking on June 28th, 2013 at about 4:15 p.m., give or take. Who's really keeping track, right? And I started my own thing. I started my own business, traveling all over the country, uh, consulting in the financial industry, and basically helping them take better care of their customers. And I mentioned that honestly and truly, it's probably the least ESOP impactful part of my story to this point. But I mention it because I've been an ESOP employee, right? So I get why ESOPs are important for employees. I see the difference in a company culture and the gains in productivity and growth that come with it, anecdotally. But I also saw it financially as a banker. So I get the financial side of it, and I get why companies sell to an ESOP trust because the company is better off. But I also get it as a business owner.
Yeah.
And you guys know that transition, the idea of selling your franchise is probably the hardest decision you're ever going to make.
Mm.
Mhm.
And when I let my business go in the spring of 23, I lost more sleep over that than I did about anything else. It was easier for me to decide to get married, to have kids, to let my kids move 14 hours away to go to college than it was to sell my business, right? So I understand that it becomes a part of you. I understand that you eat, sleep, breathe, and drink this thing. You took on risk, you built it. The idea of selling it and losing control of it is terrifying.
It is.
So somehow that led me to here, where now I help sellers make that transition to ESOP or employee-owned businesses. That's the
You
short
know,
short.
you hit some highlights about ESOPs. I years ago was a consultant for Century 21,
Sure.
and Century 21 is one of the oldest franchise companies out there. And I worked with the franchise owners, the franchise brokers, and many were at that place of considering an exit strategy, considering retiring, and creating an ESOP. And so, you know, made some introductions and helped some of our franchisees be able to do that. It was amazing to me, like you said, that literally the culture became more synergistic and people were more content and happy to work there. And the other thing that we noticed is production went up, which to me was a wonderful surprise. So I love what you are doing. I'm wondering if we can back up for those of us that are really ignorant,
Yes.
or just, no, that's not a good word to say. We just haven't looked
Consider
at this,
learning.
right? Tell us exactly what an ESOP is and how it all works. Can you share us a little
Yes.
bit about that?
So here's the short version about what happens when you sell your company to an ESOP trust, right? This trust is created and it literally buys the company from the sellers or shareholders. So the company is owned by the trust, which is overseen by a trustee. The trustee represents the employees in the transaction. Okay. Now, I want to be clear about a couple of things when I say that. Yes, there's a trust that owns the company, but what's amazing about an ESOP as a business transition tool, and again, ESOP stands for Employee Stock Ownership Plan. What's amazing about ESOP as a business transition tool is it's the only business transition method where the sellers can stay in control of the business through the process. So what I mean by that is the people that you want to run the company, and it could still be you as a seller, are still going to be running the company in the day to day. Now, it looks a little different. You add some layers of governance, like there's going to be a board and stuff that oversees some of the strategic ideas. But if you own a construction business, if you own a franchise and you're used to running it, that doesn't have to change. As a matter of fact, a lot of the clients that I work with aren't looking to do this when they're done, right? They're looking to transition. They're making ESOP a strategic decision. So 3 to 5 years later, they're ready to step away.
Yeah.
So I feel like this is a really silly question. However, I'm going to ask it. Is this for someone who has no family member to leave their business to?
Absolutely not. I'm actually working on right now an ESOP transaction where the grandson and his son work in the business, but they don't want to buy it. They don't want to take it over, right? That's not in their interest. And let's just be honest, that happens a lot when you get second, third, fourth generation. That's just not what the family wants, or the family that's in it has a role, and that role is not shareholder. That role is not owner. That role is not CEO. So it's a way to it's a way to transition the business, but make sure that the heart of the business and the legacy of the business stays what it is. Because let's just be really honest, when you sell to private equity, when you sell to a strategic partner, the business changes. You're sure as heck not in control, right? The profits that you had that you reinvested in your employees in the community are now going out of town to somebody else, right? So that high school football scoreboard you may have sponsored for 20 years isn't going to be sponsored anymore. Right. And almost every PE transaction has earnouts of some kind, and you're not in control of how those earnouts get earned. You just know you're supposed to make them to get paid. Well, that's not walking away either, right? That's not a transition you're in control of. So if you're worried about legacy and community and your employees, and you're somebody who recognizes that you want a different business model, a strategic transition, then ESOP makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. It's so true that second and third generation may not have the same passion as that entrepreneur, the person that put everything on the line.
Yeah.
And employees are vested by their day-to-day hard work. Why not financially invest them?
Well, and if you don't mind, and if you're wondering how invested the employees are and what changes when you sell to an ESOP trust, when you become an ESOP company, uh, let's just start with the impact on the employees. The average ESOP employee has a 92% greater median household wealth than a non-ESOP employee. Think about that for a second.
Wow.
We have a retirement crisis in this country, meaning that people, I don't even know what the number is off the top of my head, but I know it's embarrassingly high for the number of people that are not prepared to maintain their lifestyle after they retire.
Mhm.
But guess what? ESOP employees have a different outlook, right? But there's also an impact on the business from employees, right? Because what happens is the financial interests of the company are lined up with the financial interests of the employees for the first time.
Mhm.
So you already mentioned you saw really incredible growth and productivity in the real estate. On average, you're going to see 5 to 6% increase in productivity the year after you become an ESOP.
That's
ESOP
amazing.
companies are 2.3 to 2.5% fast. They grow faster, 2.3 to 2.5% more than non-ESOP companies, right? 2.4 to 2.6% increase in return on investment after becoming an ESOP, right? ROI goes up. So it's something where the numbers back it up, that
Mhm.
ESOP has a profound impact on the employees and the company just by going there.
So how come most people don't, I would think that most people don't know about ESOP. Most business owners don't know about ESOP. Why is that? And how do you spread awareness about it?
Okay. So do you want me to really get into opinion?
Yes.
Yeah, dig in there. Right?
Yeah, we'll dig into opinion. And this comes from my background as a banker and my background as a business owner. So not as an ESOP employee, but I think that there are a couple of really big reasons. There is a myth that ESOP, to sell to an ESOP, means that you're going to be sacrificing something, right? And this myth is prolonged because, let's just be honest, there's a ton of money in M&A.
Mhm.
And that money in M&A is not being made by the M&A brokers not making 5-6% of a transaction by selling it to, by setting it up to go ESOP,
Mhm.
right? So there's a lot of money in making sure ESOPs don't happen consistently. Now, that, and who do you contact if you want to sell your business? You're probably not calling your accountant or your banker first. You're going to an M&A conference, learning about that and connecting, or you're at an industry conference. And let's just be honest, there are M&A people crawling all over franchisee conferences too, right?
Yes.
So it's something that they're out front. But here's the truth behind this: is you don't have to be Mother Teresa to go ESOP. As a matter of fact, we find consistently that when you sell to an ESOP, you actually have an after-tax return that is greater than selling to private equity.
Wow.
As a matter of fact, there are actually tax strategies that allow you to defer having to pay taxes on an ESOP transaction as a seller. So
Wow.
it's something that, so when you ask, why aren't there more of these? Why are there consistently 250 to 300 ESOPs created a year and it isn't more, given everything that's going on? It's because there's a lot of people that have a vested interest in making sure that this doesn't get out.
Mhm. I
But
hadn't
you don't
even
have,
thought about, Matt, I hadn't even thought about the tax savings, the broker fee savings, the kind of easing out of the business so there's not this emotional trauma on the owner. I hadn't even considered all of those things.
Mhm.
Um, to me, I'm so glad that you're sharing this with our
Thank you.
audience because I think there needs to be a wake-up call around ESOPs. I think every franchisee, every business owner needs to see this as a wonderful option to exit their business in their own time.
Yep, absolutely.
question regarding all of these benefits. You've talked about you helping owners create substantial liquidity, reducing their tax burdens, and of course, boosting employee retention and productivity, and many other benefits. In your mind, what do owners typically respond to most? Or what do you think is the number one thing owners should be paying attention to? Is it the taxes? Is it the increased production? Is it employee retention? What is it that if they just knew this thing, they would be jumping on the bandwagon?
Sure. So if you don't mind, I'm going to tell you 3 different stories about 3 different businesses.
Please
And
do.
the
Yes.
takeaway for each of those businesses for ESOP. So we are going to start with a construction company. This construction company is located in Florida. And the primary concern for the 2 shareholders that founded this company was their return, right? They had been courting private equity offers for years and never once took one. They went through due diligence several times, but in the end, they know that they couldn't do that to the people that helped them be successful. The 150 employees under their, I would say care, but that's the way they looked at it, as stewards of their employee base.
Mhm.
So when they finally heard about ESOP, actually from one of their M&A advisors, the only one I've ever actually talked to who said, hey, you need to check this out, but he got sick of going through due diligence and them not taking the offers in the end, and said, you should just maybe look at ESOP because it might line up more with what you're trying to do. And sure enough, they were able to go through that process and transition the company to an ESOP, and again, make just as much, if not more money, but they felt good about themselves when they were done. So their goal was to maximize their return. They both still work inside the company, and they wanted to, again, they took on the risk, they deserve to get paid. So their goal was to maximize return, and we did that for them. So when you talk about motivation, that's one, right? Some people just want to know that the business is going to be better off after they've done.
Yeah.
So an example of that would be a pool company that I work with, right? Here's the really cool part about this. 4 owners, all 4 of the owners are in their early 40s. And they've had this business for 15 years, 20 years. Okay. None of them are leaving anything. They're sticking in it for another 15 years.
Yeah.
But they sold to an ESOP because they wanted to pull liquidity out of the business and do some other investing.
Wow.
So they
Smart.
transitioned their business to ESOP. They went 100%. You don't have to go 100%. They went 100% because they were thinking about their next investment, their next project.
Clever.
But they love their business. And you know what's really cool about that business, by the way? If you call them, we all know that we get calls from people trying to sell us stuff every day. You know what happens now in that business when they get that call? The employees, when they get asked, hey, may I speak with one of the owners? Go, you got it.
Speaking.
Right? Right. So in
Great.
their case, right, they wanted to set up their business for future success with some of
Yeah.
the special tax benefits of ESOP for the business side. I'm not going to get into that yet because we need to warn people before we talk about the tax benefits to the business, because they're going to need to pull over, make sure they're in a safe place. But from the individual investor standpoint, they were able to do the right thing and set up their business for future success. Right? Kind of cool. The third example of why you should look at this is because, quite frankly, you're in an industry where hiring and retaining talent is tough.
Mhm.
So let me talk about an engineering firm in New Jersey that I helped transition to ESOP. They honestly and truly were bleeding employees. They had competitors in a very compressed space, and their competitors were ESOP, and they could not keep employees from going to those other companies.
Mhm.
So the 6 major shareholders of this engineering firm said, we need to compete too. We need to look at this. And that was their motivation. Now, yes, they got paid, right? The company is better off. But for them, it was about hiring and retaining better talent so they stayed competitive in the workplace, in the marketplace.
Mhm.
And not everybody gets that, right? I mean, the truth of it is ESOP companies are more successful than non-ESOP companies. They're less likely to lay people off during difficult economic times. They're less likely, they're more likely, honestly, truly ESOP companies get bought and sold all the time because of how successful they are. They're sought after by investors. So it's really very interesting to go through that process for different reasons that people want to do it. But it all comes back to the same thing. I want to exit and I want to get paid as much as I can. I want to exit. I'm sorry, I don't want to exit, but I want to get paid so I can do other things and set up my business for future success. Or I know I'm not competitive in the marketplace. And the reason is because I'm competing against companies that get the talent that I'm trying to keep. And I need to go ESOP to stay competitive.
I find this fascinating.
Yeah.
I have like a billion questions. So what
Keep
happens
going.
when an employee retires?
Okay, in an ESOP company?
Yeah.
Okay, so in an ESOP company, the employee, actually, I can give an example. You guys have heard of Publix, right? The grocery store chain.
Of course.
Publix is employee owned.
I didn't know
Many
that.
people, yeah, Publix is employee owned. They have registered people working registers that have been there for 25, 30 years that are multimillionaires,
I've heard that.
right? Because
Wow.
they work for an ESOP. So what happens is when an ESOP is created, we create a whole bunch of shares. Let's just say we create 1 million shares. We do stock splits. There's 1 million shares in the ESOP. And those shares actually go out over a period of time. Usually,
Over.
let's say 30 years as an example,
Oh,
right? So those shares go out just a little bit, 1/30th every year. And every year the company has a valuation done. So you know how much those shares are worth. There's a vesting period, just like your 401k. Right? It's actually governed under the same law called ERISA that was established in the 70s. And so what happens then is over time, those shares accumulate. Hopefully the company's value goes up. And one day you retire and those shares, like I said, if you work at Publix and you've been there for 25, 30 years, you can be a multimillionaire. Now,
wow.
inside of the document that creates those ESOPs is the rules for how you pay those out. So for example, it may be something where you may pay them out over a period of time, 5, 10 years, right? But the cool part is if they retire, they've earned that money, they've contributed their time, sweat, energy, expertise to the success of the business, and the business pays them out in a way that should not be a stress on the business. As a matter of fact, businesses, as part of being an ESOP, plan for this and are ready for it. So it's not a surprise when somebody retires who has a multi-million-dollar balance and they know they can handle it.
And then when they hire someone new, that person starts at the foundation, like
Yep.
at level 0.
Yep, exactly. And again, they'll have a vesting period. So it'll be 3 to 6 years before they even have any shares available to them. There's rules for eligibility. There's rules for how many shares they get established inside of the ESOP document. And you have an administrator that handles all that for you, a third-party administrator, just like your 401k.
So cool.
It is so cool.
That's very cool. So these rules, so many years that you need to be on board before you become vested in that way or own stock. The founders, the entrepreneurs, the business owners that choose this method, do they get to set up those rules? Or are they literally some rules legally that are already set up that they have to follow?
There's guardrails, right? I mean, there's guardrails on this. For example, you can't, if you typical eligibility for like a 401k, if they work 1,000 hours, if they have been there for a year, they're over 21, right? There's guardrails, but you can also be more generous, right? Because sometimes when a company goes ESOP, they say, man, I've got employees that have been here for 20 years. Do they have to start at 0? Well, no, we can fast forward, for example, the timeline for vesting and say they get so much vesting for as long as they've been there. And they may be vested from day 1, for example. But for the most part, yeah, there's rules that are set. But here's one of the really cool things about an ESOP is some of this stuff. For example, the sale price, you're negotiating with the trustee that you hired to oversee the trust, to represent the employees. So I would also like to point out, name another M&A activity where you're hiring the person you're negotiating with, right? And you both have a mandate to negotiate the fair market value of the company. And what that really means, I've already talked about how you're not sacrificing return as a seller, right? After tax return. What that really means is it's a friendly negotiation.
Yeah.
It's
Mm.
collaborative, not confrontation. So when you go
Yeah.
through due diligence, they're not trying to rip your company apart and find every penny that they don't have to pay.
Yeah.
They're just trying to confirm and affirm the information we're giving them as an advisor for the sellers, and just making sure we're all starting with good data, because garbage in, garbage out, right?
Yeah.
So
Matt, what's the smallest company that you've worked with insofar as an ESOP? Like how
so
many employees does a company have to have?
so you typically want to have a minimum of 15 to 20 employees.
15 to 20.
Yeah, no, that's a guideline, not a rule, but there's again certain policies, right, that you need to make sure. What we don't want to have happen is you're a 4-person company, it's a husband, wife, and then his brother and his wife, and they're
Mhm.
going employee owned. Well, that's not really the spirit of the law, right? So
Mhm.
so 15 to 25 employees is a good place to be as a minimum. Most ESOP companies are a little bigger than that, but they don't have to be. I'm working on one right now where they have 18 employees, and it's a beautiful company, and it's going to be a lot of fun once they go ESOP. Got to be US based. There are Canadian and British versions of this, but this one, in my parlance, the things we're talking about, it's a US based company. Um, Another rule, if you're thinking about ESOP, is, I'm just going to be honest, you got to be successful. You got to be
Yeah.
sellable. Um, this isn't something where it's an escape hatch where I can't sell to anybody else, so I'll sell to an ESOP. No, the trustees got to want to buy it. And that means it's a company that's profitable, has a strong balance sheet, has management that's aligned, just like any other company that's up for sale.
What about, sorry, Rebecca, I'm just so
This is
curious.
good.
I know, no, go ahead, sweetie.
What about these like healthcare or DMOs like in the healthcare or dentistry where this DMO is taking over these smaller practices? Is there any, and maybe not smaller, but like maybe an office that has 15 or 20 employees, is there any data on comparisons to how well like a, a DMO taking over an office versus creating an ESOP?
I do not have hard data beyond the aggregated data that I gave you. But I can tell you, as far as if you've got a right, dental consolidation, practice finance consolidation is a very real thing, practice consolidation.
Right.
And I can tell you that ESOP holding companies are a real thing.
They what?
ESOP holding companies are a real thing, right? Where
Mhm.
you've got a holding company at the top that's an ESOP, and then all the companies underneath it that are also
Underneath.
ESOP.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Mhm.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
Matt, you hinted at something that I thought was also fascinating. That's more of a soft thing, right? Which is the
I can
culture.
tell you guys have very different interests, by the way. I love it. I love it. This is great. We're getting it all covered. So that's perfect.
I know Rebecca's going to ask about the collaboration, right?
Do it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I
Well,
know.
more specifically about how ESOPs rather, are unique in how they preserve company culture and legacy. Um, can you address why protecting that, preserving the legacy, preserving the culture is important in succession planning? You mentioned something about the heart of the business is the founder, right? And who had a vision, created a culture, but using ESOPs continues that culture. Is that correct? And why is that so important?
Well, I guess here's what I'm going to say is, it's only important if it's important to the people running the company,
Okay.
right? And
Yeah.
that's why an ESOP doesn't work for everybody, right? Because if you're somebody that just honestly doesn't care, and people build businesses where
Yeah. Just sell
they're
it.
not worried about it. That's okay. They want to dump it. They want to do this, get their payday and go on to the next thing. That's fine. Honestly, you've built your business. You've earned the right to do that. I am never going to be critical of somebody who does that.
Yeah.
But that's not the way most of us operate, right? Most of us really do want to reward the people that helped us get there. Most of us really do want to line up uh, our return because of the risk that we took with the future success of the company. We want to see the name on the door, right? That we put on. So having an ESOP culture And what really changes internally is the fact that for the first time, again, these things are lined up, but that doesn't mean anything if they don't know how they impact the company. So a lot of the education that ESOP companies do, that we help them do, is around, first of all, what is this thing, right? Because the balances start out small, the share prices start out small and grow over time. So how do you help somebody see that impact of time,
Hmm.
and stay committed to it over time? So ESOP just becomes ingrained in the communication and the way you talk about the success of what you do. And that means that if you're working in a factory, like I said, I worked it was a book publisher in college. We printed children's books. So if you ever read Where the Wild Things Are or Curious George to your kids and it was
Yeah,
printed in the
yeah.
US, we may have printed it. So yeah, I might have been a part of it. So why did that matter in that business? It means that as an employee, if I knocked over a pallet of paper in doing inventory, that was money that came out of my own pocket. And not literally, but it sure did come out of the company's pocket, which affected me directly for the first time, right? So I knew that if there was a loss,
Yeah.
man, I was hurting myself and the people that work with me. If I was printing a book and I screwed up a color mix and it didn't come out right, that was wasted time and productivity that hurt the company and I hurt the people around me, right? If I don't deliver on time and we hurt the possibility for future orders, I hurt myself and I hurt the success of the people around me.
Hmm.
I don't, can you tell me if most people think that way when they're at work? I don't think they do.
No, no. And I
So,
like your point, Matt, about literally communicating on a regular basis to the employees how valuable they are to the bottom line
mhm,
and what this means to the overall picture of the business and the future of that business. It creates a greater level of emotional investment,
mhm,
financial investment, responsibility. Um, so having that communication on a regular basis,
yeah,
I think is important, especially for someone who's never owned a business that doesn't understand that. And all of a sudden they own some stocks in a business. What does
yeah,
that mean, right?
yeah, yeah. Well, and we haven't even talked about the potential in using it in your recruiting and
Hmm.
the conversations you're having with potential employees, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a reason that when you start working for an ESOP that the employees stay a lot longer than they do in a non-ESOP company. In the construction world, again, it's big. They use it for retention. In the franchise world, there's a lot of turnover at a certain level, right? Use that for retention.
Yeah, yeah.
That's incredible. A couple of years ago, I worked with a private equity group in the food industry, and I
Sure.
had the opportunity to interview like about 27 executives, um, from these companies that they were acquiring. And their biggest concerns, like this is all sounding very familiar to me, the biggest concerns were, they were going from family-owned business to
Mhm.
all of a sudden corporate America. There were large concerns. Can you elaborate? I'm sure you can elaborate on the concerns better than
Mhm.
because that's your world, that's your space.
Honestly, so the first step in becoming an ESOP is learning about what this is, right?
Mhm.
Going another level beyond the conversation we're having. And I always call that the I think I want to phase, right? I,
I
I
think I
think I
want
think I might want to go eShop. I want to check it out.
to.
Now, I mention that because the end of that phase is something called a feasibility study, where basically we take the company's financials and we do a valuation of the company so they know what the enterprise value is.
Mhm.
And then we also plug it into a model that shows them the impact on their return, how much money they're going to make. We
Hmm.
show them the impact on the company of going ESOP, specifically the tax savings, and we show them the impact on the employees. Now, I mention that because a lot of them say, "We'll get to my stuff. Can you show me what this does for my people first?"
Hmm.
Yeah, you can show me the business, you can show me how much money I'm going to make, but can you show me what my average employee is going to have in 10 years?
Mhm.
And that's where they want to start. And that's exciting. When we get a seller or a business owner that wants to start there,
Yeah.
um, I just about jump up and do a cheer and have balloons fall from the ceiling every time. right? Not everybody that goes through an ESOP transaction thinks that way, but when they do, it's extra special.
Yeah.
For
Um,
sure.
so going through that process to see that, it's honestly, it's a big part of why I do what I do, because they're more excited for what the wealth they're creating for the people who help them get there than the wealth that they probably already have and are just adding to. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Thank you for sharing that,
Yeah.
Matt, because at the heart of the business, I know for me, because I'm constantly being pursued by private equity and other
yeah.
companies, I'm always worried about my team. I call them my team. What's going to happen if all of a sudden everything changes and I step out rather than using
hmm
something of this nature? I want to address something though.
Yes.
The world of franchising. The
Mm.
franchisor has limited input when a franchisee decides to exit, meaning that franchisee can sell to whomever they want. There's a little bit of, you know, has to meet certain financial markers.
Yep.
So talk to that. How does a franchisor introduce this idea to a franchisee? And a franchisee, how do we give them a wake-up call that this is an option uh, for succession planning, for exiting gracefully, when the franchisor has not a lot to say about what that franchisee does
Mhm.
when they sell?
Well, I guess here's what I'm gonna say is if you're educating, that's my job. And it wouldn't be the first time I've had to meet with key vendors who you're negotiating contracts with, bankers, right, to help them understand how how the balance sheets and things change. That includes the parent company sometimes. Here's the good news is a lot of times they know about this and they're enthusiastic. They've seen companies within the franchise portfolio, for lack of a better way to put it, become ESOPs along the way. The franchisees sell to an ESOP and they see the success that comes from it, and they usually don't fight it.
Good.
Now, there's times where we may need to do some education about why it makes sense for this particular franchise, but that's okay, right? That's part of the fun of what I do is making sure that everybody who needs to be on board and aligned is on board and
Yeah.
aligned.
So,
Wow.
which brings us to our next big question. To
Okay.
get that education or to get that information directly from you, how does someone get hold of you? How can they learn more?
Sure. Well, especially because there's one really big benefit of ESOP that we haven't talked about yet.
Oh, tell us.
So,
Want to
well,
miss
no.
anything?
So I'm gonna plug esopready.com
Okay.
is a great place to go. It's through my company, Vision Point Capital, my employer. esopready.com has educational pieces on it. It has an assessment that you can take to kind of plug your company information in and get a sense of whether or not ESOP might work and where some of the challenges of it might be for you. And it
Wow.
also allows you to schedule a time directly with me. So you can just go into my calendar and say, okay, he's got a time that works. Let's just sit down and go through this. I think I want to process, right? Because after I think I want to, after you go through that feasibility study and you come up with the decision making tool, right? So it's yes or no. When you're done with it, then it's I know I want to, right? That's the goal. Now here's what I want to say is we've talked about business transition and how ESOP helps facilitate that either out or forward, right, as a strategic move. We've talked about ESOP as it attends to the employees and the impact it has on retention, hiring and training better talent, the money that the way it changes your employees' lives. But we really haven't touched on the business stuff and how it changes the business beyond the cultural aspects, which are really important, right? How do you get those gains in productivity? How do you see your business be better off through ESOP? But there's one other key piece, and I alluded to it before. Make sure you got a good grip on the steering wheel. Um, ESOPs, right? ESOPs, because they are a qualified retirement plan, give the business some very specific benefits from a tax perspective. If you're an S corporation, for example, and
Hmm.
you are 100% employee owned, you no longer pay federal taxes and you no longer pay state taxes in 46 out of 50 states.
What in the world?
So, right, the K1s that you would normally get in an S corporation as a shareholder.
Yeah.
Instead, if you're 100% employee owned, go to the ESOP, and the ESOP does not pay. Now, I want to be clear that that is proportional. So if you only sell 30% of your company to the ESOP, you get 30% of that benefit.
Oh, you can sell a part of your company to an ESOP, not the whole
Yep.
thing.
Yeah.
Gosh, this
So
podcast is getting better and better.
a lot of people do it in tranches, right? They sell 30 and then they gradually work their way up, and they want to try before they buy, or they're not ready to give it up yet, or they want to bring, like you said, maybe they want to bring kids in as part of the ownership group, but they also want to sell part of it to the employees. They want to pull some liquidity out, go do some other things, but still maintain ownership and control.
Holy moly, Matt.
Right?
Just the tax benefits alone would have someone running to do that. I know what we pay here at Zorco Profiles. It's crazy the chunk it takes out.
Yep.
So for no other reason.
And I think it's actually fitting that the sun came out behind me as we were talking about this. I got like a little angelic thing going.
You look like an angel. Look like an angel. Matt, this conversation could go on and on. Pre-show, we talked about potentially having you back to discuss more of this, because franchisors, franchisees, business owners in general need to hear this story. So hopefully I can call on you again and get you back on the show.
That would be great. Well, and hopefully some of the stories help people kind of place their own situations into the context of the possibilities for them, for their business, and for their employees. So go check out esopready.com and learn more there.
ESOPready.com, guys. Thank you, Matt, for joining us today and sharing this wisdom and this experience with us. Really, really appreciate you being here today.
No, thank you, Rebecca and Tracy. Like I said, I love the yin and yang. You guys both really complement each other well, and it was a fun conversation.
Yeah, we've been working together, what, 13, 14 years now? Tracy, a long time.
Yeah.
So Tracy, your final thoughts on Mr. Matt.
I had like a million questions today. I'm so fascinated with this.
Perfect.
And for somebody who is a consultant who does succession planning, for me not to know about this makes me realize that there are so many people out there that really need to hear about it. So thank you so much for like taking a stand for continuing culture and protecting employees and protecting, the owner's interests when they're about to exit their companies. I love what you're doing, and however we can support you, we'd love to continue. And I really did not want this conversation to end today.
Me either, girl. Me either.
Well, thank you so much. That means a lot. And whenever you can do something where everybody wins, how can you not get excited about it, right?
Right.
All right, Mr. Angel Matt, thank you again, and thank you to our audience. Make sure to comment, share, like, and of course also subscribe to our podcast. And we'll see you next week on another episode of the Franchise Woman Podcast, where passion and purpose collide, profits are made, and relationships forged.